Hey guys, so I just want to go over the genetics lecture part one. So if you look at the calendar, there is an event for Punnett Square practice worksheet and video solutions. After watching this video, if you don't feel confident about how to solve genetics problems using Punnett squares, I would definitely recommend opening this link and looking at the extra practice worksheet. Even if you don't decide to do it, kind of looking through the solutions to make sure that you know how to do this, because there is going to be a test on this material, and the test is timed, so you don't have forever, and you want to make sure that you know what you're doing. This is just kind of the foundation that we need in order to know how to actually solve the bigger problems. This is the same thing that we did in sixth grade, so you're probably familiar with it, but you might need a little bit of a refresher. So the first thing we're going to do is this genetics lecture part one. The link to this video will be posted here, but you're going to print off these notes to have as you go through. The first set of notes that we're going to go over is this graphic organizer, and this is a great thing to have out as a quick reference while you're doing any genetics problems, just to remember all of the terminology. So this is the document that you're going to open, and it is color-coded if that is your thing. To print it in color would be nice, but let's go through here. So humans have 46 chromosomes. We inherited 23 from mom and 23 from dad, and the 23 sets that you inherit from each parent code for every single thing in your body. You get a copy of everything in your body from mom, and you get a copy of everything in your body from dad. And then those chromosomes line up, and whichever trait is dominant is the one that you're actually going to see. So it's not like your dad gives you your nose and your mom gives you your ears, and you piece it all together and you get a whole person. Your dad's going to give you a gene for every part of your body. Your mom's going to give you a gene for every part of your body. And then both of those will kind of line up and determine which one is actually expressed in you. So you have genes that you're not expressing right now, that you are kind of hidden in your genome. And so we're going to go over what all that means and what all those terms are. So because you have two different versions of every gene in your body, we call those alleles. So different versions of a gene are alleles. So an example of an allele would be you have a gene for eye color. You could have a brown allele, and you could have a blue allele. You could also have a green allele. So the different versions of a gene, so the gene being eye color, and the different variations are called alleles. So in Mendelian genetics, we have one gene that's represented by an uppercase letter. That allele that is represented by an uppercase letter is called the dominant allele. So in this example, I have capital A is our example of our dominant allele. That's the letter that I'm going to use to represent the trait of interest. And then we use a lowercase letter to represent our recessive allele. This is going to be the trait that is hidden, that is not expressed. So at any point when you have a dominant allele, this is the one that's going to be expressed, and the recessive allele is going to kind of hide in the background. So you may have a recessive allele for a trait that you're not expressing. The interesting thing is, because you have it in your body, you're able to pass it on to your children. So your children could have a trait that you do not possess. Because, or at least you don't express it because you're actually carrying it, and it's kind of hiding inside of your chromosomes. So alleles together, the combination of alleles is what we call a genotype. So the letter combinations that you have, whether you have two capitals, a capital and a lowercase, or two lowercase, we call that a genotype. So what alleles do you actually have? So if you have an uppercase and a lowercase allele, we say that you have a heterozygous phenotype. You may also see this as hybrid, and you also see this as a carrier. meaning that they're not expressing this lowercase letter, but they're carrying it. Heterozygous, hetero means different, so you have one of each. And so you have one uppercase and one lowercase. And again, they might also call that a hybrid. So it's not a purebred because you have one dominant and one recessive. The combination of alleles if they're both the same case. So you have two options here. Are they both uppercase or are they both lowercase? Well, if they have the same case, we say they are homozygous. But we need to clarify, is it two of the same uppercase letters or two of the same lowercase letters? So for this one, we have to be a little bit more specific. For heterozygous, once you say heterozygous right off the bat, you know that you have one uppercase and one lowercase. But for homozygous, we need to know, is it both uppercase or is it both lowercase? So if they're both uppercase, then you have homozygous, and we called the uppercase letter a dominant trait, so homozygous dominant. If they're both lowercase, then it's homozygous because they're the same, and they're both the lowercase letter, so they're both recessive. So this would look like this, and this one would look like this. The phenotype is what is the organism actually expressing and what do they actually look like. And so at any point when you have a dominant trait, you're always going to express the dominant trait in Mendelian genetics. So the combination of alleles tells us what do they actually have in their chromosomes, in their genes. Are they carrying a recessive trait with them or are they a purebred? So you could also see homozygous as purebred. So the phenotype is the physical appearance or traits, or the physical appearance of traits is probably a better way to put it. So what does it look like? So if you have two capital letters, anytime you have a capital letter, you're automatically going to express it. So if you have two capital letters, then it's going to look like dominant trait. If you have an uppercase and a lowercase, well, this one right here is going to overshadow the recessive trait. So it's going to look like the dominant trait. And then here we have two lowercase letters. We're finally going to be able to see the recessive trait because the dominant trait is not there to overshadow the recessive trait. So this is just a helpful little graphic organizer to know kind of what's going on. So if they reference a problem talking about heterozygous genotype, then you know this is the combination you have. If it is talking about a phenotype, you're looking for a physical appearance. So right here, the phenotype should be an actual word. So here, this should be a letter combination. So it'd be two letters because you have two parents. And then this should be an actual word. So the flowers are red, they are tall, they are green, they are whatever trait word you could use. People are dimpled, their eyes are blue, whatever. This would be what are their actual letters that they inherited from their parents. And then these are the individual letters and what they represent. So that is going to be helpful as you go through these genetics problems. Okay, so here is step-by-step genetics of how you actually set up a monohybrid cross. Mono means one, so monohybrid crosses are used to predict the inheritance patterns of just one trait. So here I have an example of aliens. In aliens, brown eyes are dominant to blue eyes. What are the expected genotypic and phenotypic probabilities of the offspring resulting from a cross between a heterozygous individual and a blue-eyed individual? So it says that brown eyes, I'll put a little text box over here. Sorry, I wish I could write on the screen, but I'm just not that cool. Okay, so it says that brown eyes are dominant to blue. So I'm going to use a capital B for brown. We usually use the first letter of the dominant trait as our allele letter that we're going to use. So if capital B is brown, then lowercase b is blue because brown is dominant to blue. And what are the expected genotypic and phenotypic probabilities of the offspring resulting from a cross between a heterozygous individual and a blue-eyed individual? So the heterozygous individual is going to be one of each. So hetero means different, so you're going to use one capital and one lowercase. And that is going to be crossed with a blue-eyed individual. So the only time we're going to see, oh, sorry, auto-corrected, I think. Okay, so the only time we're going to see a blue-eyed individual is if we do not have the presence of a capital letter. So automatically we know if we're not going to have any capital letters, then the only way we're going to actually see the recessive trait is two little b's. So it says determine the genotypes of the parents and the information provided in the problem. So that's what I just did. The first parent is going to be heterozygous because it's telling us that they are heterozygous, and that means one of each allele. And then the second individual is blue-eyed, and the only way we would see the recessive trait is if they have two recessive alleles. Because automatically, if you inherit one capital B, you don't have blue eyes anymore. You now have brown eyes. How do I know the genotype of the blue-eyed individual? Because they must be homozygous recessive because they are expressing the recessive trait. So they must be homozygous recessive because they're actually expressing the recessive trait. What if the problem had said a brown-eyed individual? Well, if it had said a brown-eyed individual, we actually wouldn't have enough information. They could be homozygous dominant, which is two capital B's, or heterozygous, which is this combination. So if the problem had said brown-eyed individual, it actually wouldn't be enough information. So I would add a little not enough info. What about a brown-eyed individual with a blue-eyed father? So let's think about that. If the father, let me bust out some paint. Sorry, that's made by earlier. Okay. So it said a brown-eyed individual with a blue-eyed father. So if the individual is brown-eyed, they can be this, or they can be this. But we know that one of their parents who helped contribute to their chromosomes is going to be blue-eyed, meaning that they would have to be two little b's. So if this is a parent, and they only have little b's to donate, then their child could not have two capital B's because the parent has to contribute at least one lowercase b. So if their parent was blue-eyed, then we know that they are then carrying the recessive allele because their parent had to donate a lowercase b because that's all that they had to donate. And that means that the other parent must have contributed the dominant allele, which is why they're expressing the dominant phenotype. And remember, your phenotype is the physical appearance. So even though their genotype is heterozygous and they're carrying the recessive trait, their phenotype, their physical appearance, looks like the dominant trait. So we would actually have enough information here. They would have to be heterozygous because they would have to inherit the little b from blue-eyed father. Now, the mother could have been homozygous dominant or heterozygous, but we know that the mother donated the dominant allele to the child, and the father would have to donate the lowercase letter to the child, and then because they're expressing the brown-eyed phenotype, we know that they're heterozygous. So after we've determined what the genotypes of the parents are, then we're going to actually set it up by putting the genotype of the parents on the outside. So I'm going to open Paint and do that here again. I wonder if I could do this. Okay, good fun. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the genotypes of the parents on the outside. So we had the one parent was heterozygous, and the other parent was homozygous recessive. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring these ones down, and then we're going to move these ones over. So as I bring the top ones down, I'm going to put a capital B in both boxes, and I'm going to bring this column down, and I'm going to have a lowercase b in both boxes. Then I'm going to bring these over, and this one's going to come over. So the outside represents the genotypes of the parents. This is going to represent all possible combinations of those letters that could result in that what the children could possibly have. So this isn't a definite, it's what the kids could have. So they could have kids that have a heterozygous genotype, or they have kids that could have a homozygous recessive genotype. So determine the genotypic and phenotypic probabilities of the offspring. So our letter combinations, remember that's what's called our genotype. It's super messy. That says genotype is the letter combination. Homozygous dominant would be the letter combination where you have two capital letters. And when we look inside the box, what percentage of the children have two capital letters? That is 0%. Heterozygous is the one of each, hetero different, one of each. And what percentage of our boxes have this combination where it is one of each? Well, we have 2 out of 4 boxes, which is the same as 1/2, and we know that 1/2 is 50%. Homozygous recessive is 2 lowercase letters, homo, same, recessive, little, so 2 lowercase letters. And then we know that 50% of the boxes are homozygous recessive. So if asked to determine the genotypic ratio, count the boxes and simplify. So anytime we're asked to do a ratio, you just count the boxes. So we have 2 of these and 2 of these, and so our ratio is 2 to 2, or we can simplify to 1 to 1. So our genotypic ratio is 1 to 1 because we can simplify 2 to 2. All right, now we need to look at our phenotypic ratio and phenotypic probabilities, and our phenotype is the physical appearance. Okay, so the phenotype is a physical appearance. So the physical appearance of homozygous dominant would be brown. The phenotype of a heterozygous individual would also be brown. And the phenotype of a homozygous individual, a homozygous recessive individual would be blue. So we have brown, brown, and then blue. So for phenotype, you're always looking for a word. So if asked to determine the ratio of the phenotype, you just count the boxes and simplify. So we would have 2 brown to 2 blue. And so again, we would have a 2 to 2 ratio, which we could simplify down to a 1 to 1 phenotypic ratio, a 1 brown for every 1 blue. So there's an equal chance of having either. So that is how you do those problems. And like I said, if you click here, there are a bunch more problems that you can go through, and I have solutions on each of those. And then your assignment is to turn in these notes that you just filled out along with me, and then to actually do the genetics practice problems, which I usually have as a quiz every year, but this year it's just some practice problems so that you're comfortable for your test. So if you pull up this, you'll go through, I want you to label all of these genotypes as homozygous recessive, homozygous dominant, or heterozygous. Here you're given the genotype. I'm asking what the phenotype would be. And then here I'm giving you the phenotype, and I want to know what the genotype is. So again, if you're confused about that terminology, make sure you look at the graphic organizer that we did, and it will help you figure out those terms. Then here, this is just a couple definitions. Again, use your graphic organizer. And here you will be able to actually set up the Punnett squares and then determine the percentages based on your crosses. So the parents go on the outside, the kids are resulting from the cross that you do where you bring the top ones down and the side ones over, and then you're able to count your boxes and determine your percentages for both of those. So that is kind of a setup for what we're going to do next week, which is dye hybrid crosses, which get a little bit more complicated. But I hope that was helpful, and I will talk to you later.